Hi again guys, and welcome to another Rivals matchup, and this time we've got a Rivals match which has been requested a couple of times. It's a fairly obvious match to have between the two top tier open wheel race cars of Gran Turismo. The Ayrton Senna driven Lotus 97T, which is of course a classic F1 car, and the fictional Formula Gran Turismo from the Polyphony dealership. Now, although the FGT is based on some real-world F1 cars, it's actually not a real-world F1 car. It's more of an amalgamation of ideas from different real-world F1 cars. Now, both of these cars are very strong for performance, and if you want bonus information such as more in-depth reviews or tunes for both of these, I have provided links to those in the description and at the end of this video. But for now, let's first of all see how the cars compare just on their own, and then let's put them in our head-to-head points battle. Now first up we have Ayrton Senna's Lotus 97T. This was of course one of the relatively few DLC cars to come to Gran Turismo 6, non-VGT DLC cars that is, and it's a very unusual race car in that you are actually allowed to do visual upgrades to this model, which is pretty cool. Now as far as spec, this is a very strong car. It's got a tiny 1.5 litre engine, but it's turbocharged to well over 1,000 horsepower, and it only weighs 540 kilos, which is lighter than the Polyphony FGT. It is a much older vehicle, although technically the other car is fictional, but even so it's based on a newer car, whereas this is from 1985. This is the more expensive of the two, at 3 million credits, but that's still fantastic value. This could easily be a 20 million credit car, and it would still most definitely be worth that. As far as Formula 1 cars go, this car has, for most people at least, kind of a love-hate status. Some people absolutely love the car, some people find it too twitchy or just not quick enough for an F1 machine. Personally, I like the car. I think I personally prefer it to the FGT, but let's find out how it compares to the FGT. Now, the Polyphony Formula Gran Turismo has been on the game in one form or another for longer than the Lotus 97T. It didn't used to be called the FGT, it used to be called the Polyphony 001. There was also the 002 and a variety of other secret models on Gran Turismo 3. It wasn't until Gran Turismo 4 that it became named the Formula Gran Turismo. Now, it's an extremely powerful car, though not as powerful as Senna's Lotus. It's presented as being a 3.5 litre V12. It's naturally aspirated with over 900 horsepower. It's slightly heavier than the Lotus, but in a straight line in particular, it is far faster. The top speed on this car is around 30 miles per hour quicker than Senna's Lotus. That's a pretty massive margin between the two. And around the track, although both cars of course take skill to get the best out of, the FGT, though perhaps a little slipperier, is significantly quicker when driven to its full potential. Now, before we get into the points matchup, even on a track like this, which isn't overly long, it requires a mix of handling and straight line performance, the difference between the two cars in terms of lap time is quite notable. In the Lotus, I managed to do a 129 lap, which probably isn't that great, but I'm not the quickest of drivers anyway. But in the FGT, I did a lap of 123. But what about as far as points? Well, let's find out. Now, as we lay out the points of both vehicles, this is a pretty heated rivalry. Both cars are very, very strong in terms of on-paper spec. They have huge power, massive PP levels, ultra low weight, huge horsepower per ton, and as you'd expect overall, they are both extremely fast. But which one actually wins on paper? Because the FGT was, with me driving at least, the quicker of the two around this track. But as always, we won't award that a point because there are just too many variables involved in lap times. As far as the pure on-paper spec though, let's break it down. The first point goes to the FGT with a price tag that's 1 million credits less than the Lotus, making it that much more affordable. As far as the engine capacity, well, we're not told the actual CC of the FGT down to just that, the exact CC, but we are told in the car information that it is a 3.5 litre V12, so we can assume it's around the 3500cc mark, probably a little bit less. And when you compare that to the 1.5 litre turbo of the Lotus, of course, we have to give the point to the FGT. It is a significantly larger engine. As far as the PP on both vehicles, well, they're both extremely high. They're both well over 800. In fact, they're almost Red Bull territory in some cases. But on this occasion, the point goes to the Lotus with 902 pp to 884 on the FGT, and that's a pretty significant difference between the two. Perhaps a bit too much of a significant difference given just how much quicker the FGT can be. That shows kind of an inaccuracy there as far as the PP level. Now, as far as power, the Lotus also wins by a pretty significant margin, over 100 horsepower with over 1,000 horsepower to the over 900 of the FGT, and as far as torque, it also has, not surprisingly, a pretty easy victory, mainly thanks to the fact that it is turbo aspirated, putting out 516 foot-pounds of torque to the 303 of the Polyphony. As far as weight as well, as we already mentioned, again, the point goes to the Lotus by a tiny margin of just 10 kilos. But as you'd expect from Formula cars, both vehicles are very, very lightweight. And that means that the horsepower per tonne also goes to the Lotus due to the fact that it is more powerful and lighter. It puts out 1943 horsepower per tonne. That's almost 2 horsepower per kilo. Now, even though that is the better of the two, the FGT is still putting out 1.7 horsepower per kilo, which is massive. That is far beyond any supercar on the game. Now, as far as the lap times, as we said, they're not awarded points, but it is interesting to note, as we said, that the FGT is the quicker of the two. And it's not just on this track. On any track that requires straight line performance, the FGT does have the upper hand. In fact, there's almost no circumstance where the 97T can actually outright beat the FGT, not from my personal experience anyway, and I know many other people as well have noted just how much quicker the FGT is. Now, as far as points, that means, for those who may have been following along and tabulating, that the winner of this matchup is, of course, the Lotus, with 5 points to the Polyphony's 2. Pretty one-sided battle given how strong both cars are, and as always, it's funny how often this happens, that the car that loses on paper is on this occasion not just a little bit quicker but significantly so, both around the track with a margin of 6 seconds with me driving at least, but also in a straight line where it's a clear victory both for acceleration and for top speed, with around a 30 mph advantage with low aero and longer gearing. Now, overall, I would recommend both vehicles. The Lotus is a full premium, whereas the Polyphony is a semi-premium with a kind of detailed interior, but not that much. You do also have the colour options on the FGT, which is kind of made up for with the body modifications on the Lotus. So both cars have interesting advantages over each other in more less important ways, stuff like visuals, which allows for, of course, personalisation rather than necessarily being quicker. But on this occasion, on paper at least, the Lotus is the winner. If you can afford to, I would recommend checking out both of these cars because they're both very interesting. The Lotus is an incredibly quick vehicle, but it's almost more of a collector's piece with more historical value, whereas the FGT can actually get the job done even better than the Lotus when it comes to just sheer racing ability. But that's it for this particular Rivals matchup, and if there are any rivalries that you would like to see, feel free to slap those down in the comments below. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.